The notification popped up on my phone at 3:42 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing portfolio statements in my corner office. Sarah had posted another LinkedIn update, this time featuring a professional photo of herself at a tech conference podium with the caption that would change everything between us. I read the post 3 times before taking a screenshot. 2,847 likes and climbing. Comments flooding in from industry professionals, family, friends, and networking connections, all praising Sarah's insights about entrepreneurial success while agreeing that some people just don't have what it takes. What none of those commenters knew was that Sarah's tech empire, the company she'd built her reputation on, the startup that had launched her speaking career, the business that funded her luxury lifestyle, existed entirely because of funding from the sister she was publicly humiliating. The relationship between Sarah's success and my money had started 3 years earlier, though she'd never made the connection. Her original business plan had been brilliant but underfunded. Traditional investors had passed, banks had declined her loan applications, and crowdfunding had raised less than 10% of her target. That's when Meridian Capital Partners, one of my shell companies, had approached her with an offer. $50 million in series of funding with remarkably favorable terms. No board seats required, minimal reporting obligations, and complete operational freedom. Sarah had been so grateful for the miracle investor that she'd never bothered to investigate who actually owned Meridian Capital Partners. For 3 years, I'd watched my sister build her tech empire on my money while treating me like the family disappointment at every gathering. She genuinely believed her success was entirely self-made. Her funding had come from smart networking, and her achievements proved she was the successful sibling while I was the one who never learned how to build anything meaningful. The irony had been educational until today. This LinkedIn post crossed a line from private family dynamics into public professional humiliation. Sarah had decided to use my supposed failures as content for her personal brand, and 2,847 people had validated her narrative. I opened my contact list and called David Morrison, my primary financial advisor. Emma, good to hear from you. How can I help? I need to discuss the Meridian Capital position in TechFlow Solutions. Sarah's company? The $50 million investment? What are you thinking? Complete withdrawal. I want every dollar pulled out by market close tomorrow. There was a long pause. Emma, that's essentially their entire funding base. Without Meridian's investment, TechFlow is looking at immediate insolvency. I understand the implications. This will destroy the company. 200 employees, dozens of client contracts, years of development work. Are you certain this is what you want? I looked at my phone screen, where Sarah's post now had 3,156 likes and comments like, "So true. Some people never figure out how to create real value, and your sister should learn from your example instead of making excuses." I'm certain. Begin the withdrawal process immediately. I'll need to review the investment agreements, but given the structure we used, I believe we can exercise the emergency liquidation clause. Should I prepare a statement for the other investors? What other investors? Right. Meridian is the sole funding source. This will be dramatic. David handled the technical details while I finished my day at the consulting firm where I maintain my cover as a mid-level business analyst. My colleagues had no idea that their quiet, unassuming coworker controlled investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The beauty of the Meridian Capital structure was its complete anonymity. Sarah knew she'd received funding from a private investment firm, but the actual ownership was buried beneath layers of legal entities that made tracing nearly impossible. She'd built her entire empire on money from the sister she publicly mocked, and she'd never suspected the truth. That evening I drove to Sarah's penthouse apartment in my modest Toyota Camry, the same car she loved to point out whenever family discussions turned to who was doing well in life. Her building's parking garage was filled with luxury vehicles, including her Tesla Model S that she'd purchased with what she believed were profits from smart business decisions. Sarah's apartment was everything mine wasn't: floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, art pieces worth more than most people's annual salaries. All of it funded through distributions from Meridian Capital Partners, which she thought were investor dividends from successful company performance. Emma, this is a surprise, Sarah said, opening her door with a kind of smile that suggested she was already planning to turn my visit into social media content. What brings you to the successful side of town? I saw your LinkedIn post today. Oh, it's doing incredibly well. Over 3,000 likes so far. I think it really resonated with people about the importance of persistence and vision. It was certainly revealing. Sarah gestured toward her living room, where her laptop was open to analytics dashboards showing TechFlow's performance metrics. The company was indeed performing well, growing rapidly, expanding into new markets, building a strong reputation in the tech industry. I've been meaning to talk to you about goal setting, she continued, settling onto her designer sofa. I know you've been struggling to find direction, and I think I could help you develop a more strategic mindset. Strategic mindset? Thinking bigger picture. Instead of just getting by with your consulting work, maybe consider what you could build if you really applied yourself. I looked around the apartment that existed because of my money while listening to my sister explain how I could improve my life by becoming more like her. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. Take TechFlow for example, she continued. 3 years ago it was just an idea. But through networking, persistence, and really understanding what investors want to see, I was able to secure the funding to make it happen. How much funding? 50 million Series A. Single investor actually, which is unusual but worked perfectly. Meridian Capital Partners. They're a private firm that specializes in tech startups with high growth potential. Do you know much about them? Sarah shrugged. Not really. They're very hands-off, which I appreciate. Some investors want constant updates and board seats and all that micromanagement stuff. Meridian just provides capital and lets entrepreneurs do what they do best. That does sound ideal. It is. And it's proof that when you have a solid business plan and the confidence to pursue it, the right opportunities will find you. That's what I meant in my LinkedIn post about some people just never learning. Success isn't complicated, you just have to be willing to take risks and think beyond small-scale consulting work. Friday morning brought a busy day of meetings with attorneys and financial advisors. The process of withdrawing $50 million from a company required careful coordination to minimize legal exposure while ensuring complete fund recovery. The withdrawal will trigger immediate cash flow crisis, David explained during our morning meeting. TechFlow's burn rate is approximately $4.2 million per month. Without Meridian funding, they have maybe 3 weeks of operating capital. What about their revenue? Growing but not sufficient to support current operations. They've been scaling aggressively based on expected continued investment. Classic startup model, grow fast, worry about profitability later. And Sarah's personal financial situation? Also tied to company performance. Her salary, bonuses, stock options, everything depends on TechFlow remaining viable. If the company collapses, she loses everything. The withdrawal process began at market open. By noon, TechFlow's bank accounts would show a $50 million outflow with no corresponding asset transfer or explanation. By afternoon, Sarah would receive notification that her primary investor had exercised their liquidation rights and terminated all funding agreements. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Sarah had been posting Instagram stories throughout the morning, photos of her corner office, screenshots of positive client feedback, inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship and persistence. At 12:47 p.m. the post stopped. At 1:15 p.m. my phone rang. Emma, something terrible has happened. Sarah's voice was shaking. Our investor pulled out. Completely. No warning, no explanation, just gone. That sounds serious. It's catastrophic. $50 million just disappeared from our accounts. Our lawyers are trying to figure out what happened, but the investment agreements apparently included some kind of emergency withdrawal clause. Why would they do that? I have no idea. Our performance has been excellent. Revenue growing, client satisfaction high, market expansion ahead of schedule. There's no logical business reason for this. I could hear Sarah crying on the other end of the line. 3 years of building her company, her reputation, her lifestyle, all of it crumbling because the investor she'd never met had decided to withdraw support. What does this mean for the company? We're basically bankrupt. Without that funding, we can't make payroll, can't pay suppliers, can't maintain our office lease. I'm looking at complete business failure within weeks. I'm so sorry, Sarah. The worst part is the timing. I just posted about success and persistence and now I'm facing total collapse. It's going to look like karma or something. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Sarah explaining the scope of the disaster while I made appropriate sympathetic responses. Her confidence had completely disappeared, replaced by panic about losing everything she'd built. "The thing I keep thinking about," she said, "is that LinkedIn post yesterday. Here I was talking about success and how some people never learn, and now I'm the one losing everything." The post was pretty harsh. "I know. I was thinking about you when I wrote it, actually. About how you've been doing the same consulting work for years without really building anything bigger. But now, maybe there's something to be said for stability over growth. Maybe. I mean, you're not going to lose your job because your investor disappeared. You're not facing bankruptcy and public failure and having to explain to 200 employees why they're being laid off." The irony was perfect, but explaining it would serve no useful purpose. Sarah was learning the difference between success built on solid foundations and success built on borrowed capital, even if she didn't know the capital had been borrowed from the sister she'd publicly humiliated. Over the weekend, Sarah's LinkedIn post took on new significance as news of TechFlow's collapse spread through industry networks. The same people who had liked her insights about success and persistence were now commenting with sympathy about her unexpected investor betrayal. "So sorry to hear about TechFlow," read one comment. "Just goes to show how quickly things can change in the startup world. Your post about persistence feels even more relevant now," added another. "Hope you can find a way to rebuild." Sarah's response was gracious but revealed her complete bewilderment. "Thank you for the support. Sometimes success isn't just about what you build, it's about factors beyond your control. Learning to be humble about both victories and setbacks." Monday brought more conversations with Sarah as she navigated the practical aspects of business closure. The 200 employees would be laid off by Wednesday. Client contracts would be terminated with penalty payments she couldn't afford. The office lease would default, the equipment would be repossessed, and her personal guarantees on various business loans would trigger bankruptcy proceedings. "I keep trying to understand what went wrong," she told me during our Tuesday phone call. "Our business model was sound, our execution was excellent, our growth metrics were industry-leading. The only variable was investor confidence, and I have no idea what changed. Maybe they needed liquidity for other investments? Maybe. But the timing feels almost personal. Like someone wanted to watch us fail. That seems unlikely. Investors want returns, not revenge." "You're probably right. It's just 3 years of my life gone overnight. My reputation, my team, my financial security. All dependent on someone else's decision that I had no control over." The following week, industry publications ran stories about TechFlow's collapse, focusing on the cautionary tale of startup dependence on single investors. Sarah was interviewed for several articles, where she emphasized the importance of diversified funding and the risks of anonymous investor relationships. "The hardest lesson," she told TechCrunch, "is that success without sustainable foundations is just an illusion. We built something remarkable, but it was built on someone else's money and someone else's confidence. When that disappeared, everything disappeared." The interviewer asked about her plans for the future. "I'm taking time to reassess. Maybe looking at more stable opportunities, building something that doesn't depend on external funding or investor whims." "Any interest in consulting work?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "Actually, yes. My sister works as a business consultant and I used to think that was small-time thinking. Now I'm realizing there's real value in work that you control, that doesn't depend on other people's continued support." 3 months later, Sarah called with an update. "I've been doing some freelance consulting work," she said. "Nothing dramatic, just helping small businesses with strategic planning and process improvement." "How's that going?" "Better than expected. The pay is decent, the work is interesting, and most importantly, it's mine. No investors to please, no funding to worry about, no risk of someone pulling the rug out from under me." "That sounds sustainable." "It is. And Emma, I owe you an apology. That LinkedIn post about success running in our family except for you, that was unfair and mean-spirited. You've been doing steady, reliable work for years, building real skills and genuine value. I was so caught up in the glamour of my startup success that I forgot the importance of substance over flash. I appreciate you saying that. The truth is, you've been more successful than me this whole time. You built a career that couldn't be destroyed by someone else's whims. That's real security, real achievement." 6 months after TechFlow's collapse, Sarah had established herself as an independent business consultant specializing in sustainable growth strategies. Her LinkedIn posts now emphasized the importance of building businesses that could survive without external funding, learning from failure, and maintaining humility about success. The transformation was remarkable. The sister who had publicly mocked my small-time thinking was now advocating for exactly the kind of stable, self-reliant approach I'd always taken. We met for coffee on the anniversary of her LinkedIn post that had started everything. "I've been thinking about that post a lot," she said, stirring her latte. "About success and learning and what it means to really achieve something meaningful. What conclusions have you reached?" "That I was completely wrong about almost everything. Success isn't about how much funding you can raise or how fast you can scale. It's about building something that lasts, something that serves people, something that exists because of your effort rather than someone else's money. Those are hard lessons to learn." "They are. And I learned them the expensive way. But maybe that's what I needed, to lose everything in order to understand what actually matters." I thought about the $50 million that had funded Sarah's empire and was now supporting scholarships for women entrepreneurs. Her failure had become opportunities for other people to build sustainable businesses without depending on anonymous investors who might disappear without warning. "The strangest part," Sarah continued, "is that I still don't know who Meridian Capital Partners really was. My lawyers tried to trace the ownership, but it's buried under so many legal structures that finding the actual person behind the investment is basically impossible." "Does it matter who they were?" "I guess not. Maybe they were just business people who saw better opportunities elsewhere. Maybe they needed liquidity for personal reasons. Maybe they lost confidence in the tech sector. Maybe they didn't appreciate being taken for granted." Sarah looked at me curiously. "What do you mean?" "Nothing specific. Just that investor relationships are still relationships. If someone provides capital that enables your success, maybe acknowledging that contribution matters more than most entrepreneurs realize." "You might be right. I probably should have made more effort to understand and appreciate whoever was funding my company. Instead, I just took the money and assumed it would always be there." We finished our coffee while Sarah continued reflecting on lessons learned and opportunities gained through failure. She genuinely seemed happier as an independent consultant than she had been as a funded startup CEO. Walking to our cars, Sarah stopped and turned to face me. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you think I'm a better person now than I was a year ago?" "I think you're more authentic now. More grounded. More aware of what you can control versus what you can't." "That's what I hoped. The arrogance, the assumption that I had all the answers, the way I treated other people's choices as inferior to mine, all of that needed to go. Growth often requires losing things we thought we needed." "Exactly. And sometimes the things we lose weren't really ours to begin with." Driving home, I reflected on the strange journey from Sarah's cruel LinkedIn post to her genuine transformation. My decision to withdraw funding had been motivated by frustration with her public humiliation, but the outcome had been more constructive than I'd expected. Sarah had learned humility, built real skills, and discovered the satisfaction of self-reliant success. Her collapse had forced her to develop authentic expertise rather than depending on borrowed capital and borrowed confidence. The $50 million was being put to better use funding women entrepreneurs who understood the value of sustainable business practices. Sarah's failure had become a foundation for other people's genuine success. Sometimes the most valuable education comes from losing everything you thought you wanted and discovering what you actually needed. Sarah had learned the difference between success and the appearance of success, between achievement and the illusion of achievement. And I had learned that the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. Sarah's LinkedIn post about family success had been cruel, but her journey from funded entrepreneur to independent consultant had ultimately validated the steady, sustainable approach she'd once mocked. The sister who had publicly dismissed my small-time thinking was now building exactly the kind of modest, reliable business she'd once considered beneath her. Sometimes the best way to prove your point is to let other people discover it for themselves, even if the discovery requires losing everything they thought they wanted first.